Welcome everyone to this video. I'm S.J. Anderson, astrologer here, coming into you live. First, I guess, live stream of 2026. And I know I didn't do that many last year, but I'm going to do a live stream this year to kick off this year and to kind of dive into 2026 and some of the interesting astrology. In this video, I want to look at some of just the profound shifts that are happening in reality. Of course, everybody knows that 2026 is that great year of change and is that great year of triggering that so many people are talking about. And it's across industries, I've noticed. It's not just astrologers that are saying, hey, 2026 is this big deal. There's other fields, tech, politics, across industry, people have kind of, there's a convergence of ideas that 2026 is going to be this big year. And I'm here, what are we recording this on the 4th of January? And so we're right out of the gate in 2026. Obviously, yesterday we saw a big geopolitical event. And that's some of what I want to talk about today is the kind of geopolitical side of 2026. As we know, astrology is not just operative at the level of the geopolitical, it's also operative in our personal lives. And that distinction between kind of outer and mundane, as we could say in the astrology world, and our interpersonal and our own chart activations and our own stories, that distinction is, yes, we can make it, but sometimes we have to kind of blur the distinction because as above, so below, as out, so in, I think fits with how we work with astrology. And so when we come into this first chart that I have up, the chart of 9/11, I wanted to talk about, to lay some groundwork here, because you see in that chart of 9/11, Mars was in Capricorn. It had just entered Capricorn, and it was applying to oppose Jupiter in Cancer. And this is what I would call a great cardinal trigger. You also had Pluto there in the cardinal axis in Libra, but we're triggering the cardinal axis in 9/11, and that is what's happening right now, where Mars is in Capricorn applying to oppose Jupiter in Cancer, and we're triggering the cardinal axis right out of the gate here in 2026. And of course, this is a theme all of 2026 with Saturn and Neptune in Aries in the cardinal axis. Mars will join them later in the spring this year in the Northern Hemisphere. And so why that's relevant is that the cardinal signs in astrology symbolically are triggering new reality. They create new reality. And I do think in our own lives, we have to be thinking about what new realities are we creating this year. And it's the ideas that we see it in the outer world with these geopolitical shakeups. We also get it in our inner world. And it's some of how we might be able to frame this year, and with 9/11, I wanted to just talk about it here briefly because that changed all of reality. I don't know how many of you were alive in the 90s. I was very young, but I was a young, man becoming a young adult during that time. And the whole tone and vibe of the world shifted almost overnight, literally overnight, because we became from this kind of optimistic internet era of so much as possible, and it shifted into this little bit of a darker way of seeing the world, right? With the war on terror and those wars that took place for 20 years. I think the war in Afghanistan didn't end until the Biden administration ended it in earlier this decade. But that was that 20-year cycle. The other thing about 9/11 is that Saturn and Jupiter had conjoined just the year before, and that is a 20-year cycle with Saturn and Jupiter. And it was very clear that that whole 20-year cycle of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus was about this war on terror. Some people talked about war on terra, and they made terror terra. It was like war on the earth. And I think that fits when you think about Taurus as being terra, and how so much was this focus of, war on terra or war for oil, wars for oil, they said. That would fit with this Taurian activation with Saturn and Taurus. Anyhow, I don't want to get too off into that. It's just this higher level idea that when you trigger Capricorn, you trigger the cardinal axis, we have these, deeper rearrangements of the fundamental nature of reality. And fundamental is a key word with Capricorn. I mean, Saturn rules Capricorn. Saturn is the fundament. It's the fundamental layer, as you see in so many astrological texts. And so to have that part of this moment in January 2026 is also something highly relevant, that these triggers, and we're going to see that in a few chart examples I have in this video, those triggers in Capricorn and Aquarius trigger the fundamental layer, and they rearrange things fundamentally. And we've seen that repeatedly. And so you had it here in the chart of 9/11 with Mars in Capricorn and the South Lunar Node in Capricorn, Ceres was there with those two placements. You saw it in 2020 with Saturn and Jupiter, a lot of 2020 in Capricorn, and then they of course conjoined in Aquarius, the other Saturn ruled sign. So we're rearranging the fundamental layer when we talk about these Saturn ruled sectors of our zodiac, and we're seeing that now. Okay, all right, I want to shift here, and I'm going to be doing this with these lives. I'm going to be pulling tarot cards. Some of you might know that have followed me. I used to do a lot of tarot on my channel, and I'm bringing that back in 2026 because we need it. Part of it is that the tarot allows for a offering and a kind of supplication or an invitation into the unknown. And I think so much of astrology can be this left brain intellectual side of things where people are so logical and we're like academics, right? Reading ancient texts and trying to logically proceed in terms of, you know, our conclusions astrologically. But I do think with this year being so big, there's room to come into the unknown, which that's what sortilege is, or randomization, to pick cards. You're actually saying, I don't know, and I'm going to open myself up to something that I can't know or I don't know, because, and I do tarot reading with random number generators often. I'm going to do that here today. I have no idea what this random number generator is going to generate. We have no idea what the cards are going to be. And so that means that we're kind of giving ourselves over to an unknown. And so there's room for kind of a divine intervention or for a delivery of divine wisdom or knowledge that isn't just what our little left brain academic models can bring in. So let's get cards. I'm going to pull three. I love the 3-card readings. And the other thing I just want to say about this is that you've got with Jupiter and Cancer, I think, notions of truth and wisdom and divine truth and wisdom, even maternal divine truth and wisdom. You can see that painting behind me. I love that one, but there's a woman there, a silhouette. And I do think there's this kind of Mother Gaia divine supplication that we really need to deploy this year. We need, you know, help us, Divine Mother, okay? And I'm a Catholic. I grew up Catholic, so it fits very well with that tradition. We have Mother Mary, the Beatles song, Mother Mary, come to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. This whole idea of kind of a maternal or Mother Gaia model. And I think that's some of the tarot model in terms of being more of a right-brained. Often that's maybe associated with more feminine or receptive. And I want to be receptive to divine intervention, and we're going to do that by pulling these tarot cards. All right, let me get these 3 cards. And I'm not going to talk about them all right now. I'm just going to kind of overlay these in during this live stream, and we'll kind of come back to these to see if there's information that these cards are going to provide for us. And so the first card, and you'll see it here. I'm going to get it up with my screen share. I've got to go here. Where is that? Okay, give me a second here. Oh, here it is, here it is. So here's the first card, and this is the 2 of Cups, which is very interesting in the context of what I just said and what I just talked about, because this is a card that corresponds to the first 10 degrees of the zodiac sign Cancer, where Jupiter is not now, but the full moon was actually not into those 10 degrees, the recent full moon either, but it is the Cancerian archetype. And I think in the 9/11 chart, we'll go back to that. I do believe Jupiter was there as well, but the notion is that we're initiating to nurture with a card like this. And this is a very positive card, 2 people kind of loving each other, exchanging water. You know, I want to give you nurturance, you can give me nurturance. There's a kind of idea here of finding a pair that you're able to kind of heal with. And I come back to the Cancerian concept that is so dominant in 2026's astrology, first half of the year with Jupiter and Cancer, that I do think we'll need to try to love and heal and nurture, especially if things go haywire. I don't know where you guys were in 2020, but I remember how wild that year was. I mean, a lot of us, so much unknown. I mean, unprecedented global shutdowns of reality. And of course, that was Saturn in a cardinal sign the last time. We're going to get Saturn in a cardinal sign again this year on the 14th of February. But there may be some of that here this year, of whole new worlds that we don't know how to navigate because they're new. That's what Aries is, the first degree of the zodiac, a cardinal sign initiating new, where Neptune and Saturn will be. And so, you know, this helps when you have so much new stuff. Is who's going to nurture? How can you nurture or be nurtured? And I think that can be a guiding principle here as we continue looking at this talk. So I'm going to keep going here. We're going to keep moving through this live. This is the next thing I wanted to point out here, is that the quadruple conjunction or we say the co-presence of 4 planets in Capricorn that we have right now, with Venus in Capricorn, Mars in Capricorn, the Sun in Capricorn, and Mercury in Capricorn. Those 4 planets will be in Capricorn together until the 17th of January, when Venus leaves and enters Aquarius, and then all of those planets will be in Aquarius by the 23rd of January. That's a huge thing for January's astrology. We come out of the Capricorn, we enter the Aquarian. And I want to say this here, because Capricorn sometimes is thought about as the destructive side of Saturn's domicile, the Earth domicile, where there's notions of Saturn kind of tearing down that which isn't the foundation in Capricorn. And you really kick off something new by sometimes destroying with Saturn in Capricorn, or with just Capricorn in general. I think a lot of that fits with Mars being the exaltation lord of Capricorn as well, which is a destructive energy, or can be. So you've got this Mars-Saturn side of Capricorn, which is cardinal. It's like, let's tear stuff down to start anew. That's Capricorn. And then when things shift into Aquarius, it's like, all right, here's all of our new ideas that we're going to lay on top of the foundation that we just established in Capricorn. So we get a version of that here in January, February 2026, where January is this Capricorn, maybe more destructive, or more kind of, let's destroy a little bit. Destroy might be the wrong word. Let's just say cut up, we would say down where I'm from in Texas. You're cutting up, you're just rambunctious, or kind of, hen in what China shop, or whatever that saying is, bull in the China shop. And then you come back in and you have a fresh slate from which to layer in the fresh concepts, and that could be more of the Aquarian. So look for that transition in January, where maybe it's a more intellectual implementation for you, and you're able to kind of overlay some of what has been kicked up here for you with these 4 planets in Capricorn to start this month of January. But look when this has happened last. We had it in 1961 and 1962. So that was the famous Saturn in Capricorn to kick off the 1960s. The Cuban Missile Crisis happened later in October in 1962. And that was a big shift in terms of the Cold War. Kennedy was president, this face-off with the USSR, and then it shifted in. That moment, the rest of that decade, was very much Cold War ratcheting up, of these competition with the USSR, and these battles over the sphere of influence with the USSR and communism, where America was intervening in Asia to fight off communism. I do think when you look back at that and you say these foundational layers were part of the rearrangements, as I was talking about earlier here, that maybe that's some of what we're getting, and we're going to see here with this thing in Venezuela that just happened. I do think it's about foundational restructuring of the geopolitical sphere, the kind of rules of the game. The grand chessboard, as Zbigniew Brzezinski would say. We've got kind of a new rules for that grand chessboard game here going into this year, possibly. The next time that happened was in '94, and you can see that was in December '93 into January '94. You had these 4 planets in Capricorn. That's interesting, because in '94 you had the signing by Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin of these Kremlin Accords, which stopped the pre-programmed aiming of nuclear missiles towards each country's targets, and also provided for the dismantling of the nuclear arsenal in Ukraine. So that was, again, a rearrangement of the grand chessboard at a foundational level, these Capricorn signatures. And this is front and center in our reality right now, is Ukraine, right? Missiles and weapons in Ukraine. So you see how this is repeated in our reality. This 4-planet conglomeration has repeated here, and we're now hitting these same themes. One part of this moment that you're going to see here in February, this expires. The Russia-US nuclear pact is set to end in February 2026, and some commentators are saying we're not going to see another. Some are saying they may extend. Either way, the idea of weapons in Russia and America and agreements, Capricorn foundations, is returning as these planets return to Capricorn. Very, very interesting. And I think, I'll say this here, we say it all the time, because this is what the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has always been about in definitely the 20th century, and probably before that, is Russia. And we get that on the 20th of February. Neptune and Saturn will conjoin in the first degree of the zodiac this year. And there's an eclipse in Aquarius on the 17th of February, 3 days before that. So it's not simply that we have this 4-planet conjunction in Capricorn now that is about restructuring foundations. We're also going to get the initiations in Aries with these 2 longer-term cycle planets in that first degree that will also participate and symbolically indicate restructuring of the reality, or new fresh breakthroughs in the reality. That separate video, we've talked about it so much, you can find those videos on my channel that describe it. But it tells us Russia and US, the nuclear pact, expires in February, same month as the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So be aware of that, just how much new stuff may be reasserting here at the level of the geopolitics and at the level of the agreements with great nations. Again, I want to say it. These can be metaphors as we trace the news and as we trace the landscape of reality vis-a-vis the bigger stories in the news. These can be metaphors for our own lives. You know, where are you wanting to kind of break out of what you have agreed to before in terms of maybe the stories you've told yourself? A lot of times we have these narratives that we live with for decades and decades, our enculturation, our familial upbringing, everything we think we can be or that we have shown ourselves to be. All of that can be broken out of, right, this year. And this goes to things like the numerological year one, 2 + 2 + 6 = 10, which is, you know, combines to equal 1, 1 + 0. And now you have a 1 year with the numerology, as people have talked about. So there's always room to reinvent the self and to break out and throw off the agreements that you have adhered to up until this moment in reality. And you may want to use the news as a metaphor for your life, okay? What agreements are you going to let go by the wayside and leave in the dustbin of your narrative for your lifetime here that you get to enjoy and co-create around? So, okay, keep in mind that we've got this triple conjunction here. It is this week, January 6th. You've got the Sun and Venus conjoining. That's the Cazimi of Venus. You've got Venus and Mars conjoining on the 8th, and you've got the Sun and Mars conjoining on the 9th. So it's a 3-day stretch, 16 degrees, 18 degrees, 19 degrees of these Capricorn conjunctions. That's interesting. I don't have it up here, but in February 2022, Mars and Saturn conjoined at 16 degrees Capricorn. This time they conjoined at 18 degrees, but what was happening in February 2022, ding, 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 right? This was when the Russia-Ukraine conflict triggered and really went big in 2022. And so you get another version or another trigger of that. So it's just another reason why I think the Russia-Ukraine stuff is high on the radar. Those of you who are into mundane astrology, those of you who are watching the globe and the world events unfold, the astrology is telling us keep an eye for multiple reasons on that area. All right, and pray for peace, obviously. You know, as a human being, of course, we want that to be resolved very, very quickly and for humanity to be brought onto the other side of that very, very soon and very, very quickly. And I'm certainly in that camp. When you talk about the astrological and mundane astrological perspectives, we're mapping it from just more of these technical astrological views, and it becomes very, very interesting as an object lesson in terms of mapping reality. So, okay, let me just keep going here because I want to continue with this. And now I want to shift into the Venezuela conversation because we know that just happened this weekend. You saw here was the chart of the full moon of Cancer from this weekend, and the moon was triggering Jupiter in the cardinal axis, and there's Mars opposite, applying to oppose Jupiter, just like in the 9/11 chart. And so this may be the event. I talked about this in some videos in December. I was like, hey, we haven't seen the Jupiter in Cancer 9/11 or Berlin Wall event yet. We haven't seen that yet. And these events of this weekend of 3 January maybe qualify, in my view, because of how much they set new precedents in terms of international legal norms. And not that those norms were ever followed, but I think there was a kind of pretense of, oh, rules-based order, that's a real thing. Now, with these events of this weekend, that's kind of out the window as much as it's ever been in recent years, that we kind of have gloves off, or the mask is off, or the emperor has no clothes. It's a raw power reality. Countries just do what they want to do for purposes of power. And that would fit in a way with this cardinal trigger and these kind of rearrangements of reality. You can see that there's already commentators talking about a dangerous precedent. World leaders react to the U.S. attack on Venezuela. And whatever you think about the country there, I know people from Venezuela, they don't like their leader there. They don't like what's been going on there. I know some people that at least don't. I don't know everybody. I don't have a survey of all Venezuelans. But setting that aside, when you're talking about just the international order and the rules of the international order, it really does kick us into maybe some fresh territory here right out of the gate in 2026. that we're operating with different rules now, and countries just are going to, I guess, do what they want to do if they feel like they need to do it for their geopolitical interests. That appears to be what at least people are afraid of, this kind of dangerous precedent being set. And again, the reason why I'm talking about is that it fits with the charts we've been looking at. Here's the chart of the event, roughly. Here's the full moon in Cancer, but then we're back to the 9/11 chart, and this was the chart where the whole world changed in terms of the rules-based order of that time going into the events of 9/11 were different than after the events of 9/11, when you had the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, arguably against the law, against the international legal structures that were operative at that time. And so I think we're in a world that's resonating with that. And again, this chart has Jupiter in Cancer and Mars in Capricorn, just like the chart that we see with the attack on Venezuela and the arrest of Maduro. I guess, is he arrested? I don't know why, but I guess American courts have arrested him and charged him with crimes against American law. So here's the chart of Venezuela. If you can see here, there's different competing charts for the chart of Venezuela, but I thought this was worth looking at because there is the moon in Capricorn at 4 degrees. And the moon is the people in mundane astrology. You see that there. And so if you're going to use the 1811 chart, you've got triggers right now with their moon. And then, of course, their sun is in Cancer. So again, their chart is this cardinal axis Cancer Capricorn luminary configuration that these planets have now triggered. And it's just an object lesson in using the nativity of a nation as a timing piece for, what may come. You can see how the sun is very close to the midheaven in this chart as well. And right now, this is front and center as Jupiter's near here. It's like, hey, everybody's talking about Venezuela. Venezuela is the big story. It's a classic case of Jupiter triggering a 10th house sun, just to use it from that viewpoint as well. So, okay, let's get back to the tarot. Let's pull the second card, and let's see if we can add to this conversation and see what else the deck may be indicating to us in terms of what we want to talk about here, or what we want to, again, I view tarot as helping us to converge onto topics of conversation. It's basically asking reality, hey, show me. And reality says, okay, here's some things that you need to be shown, and here we go. Here is the middle card. This is the 5 of Cups, a sad card, disappointment. You sometimes see this card labeled as, or themes of disappointment and sadness. It's almost like the post-party letdown. This is the first decan of Scorpio. It's a Venus-ruled decan. Sometimes it's like the sadness after too much exuberance, or maybe the hangover the morning after, or something like this. And I wonder if some of that is just going with the geopolitical, is thinking about how, what are the ramifications of what's just happened. And the morning after is always a little bit more of shocking, and sometimes, oh no, what just happened? What did I just do? The morning after energy can often include that, whereas the moment of the excess feels good. And so I wonder if this is telling us that there's going to be some kind of ramifications or reverberations that may negatively impact like the world structure, as this then gets into the solar eclipse in Aquarius in February that we're going to talk about to finish this live. I think this may be telling us, hey, it's like, oh no, look what just happened. The water got spilled and it's not going to get filled back up, and now we have to deal with this new reality, or this new world we're in. I think for everybody here, I see this and I'm thinking about post full moon in Cancer resting. I know those can be often triggering. For me, this one wasn't as bad. Sometimes you can't sleep during a full moon. I don't know if any of you guys out there had that, where the full moon just kept you up, or maybe it's been a little bit gyrative, especially opposite all of those planets in Capricorn, including Mars. And maybe this is some of the idea that you're needing to kind of get your nervous system reset, or kind of chill out this week with this waxing moon. The moon will be in this decan this weekend. It enters Scorpio on Sunday. So maybe this is kind of pointing us to that. Like, just try to rest here. Try to give yourself a little bit of a break if it's been quite intense to kick off the year. So, okay, let's get back to these charts. And I want to continue here. And this is what I was alluding to earlier, that I am more interested almost in this Aquarian shift that's about to happen, and the solar eclipse in Aquarius that takes place on the 17th of February, 3 days after Saturn enters Aries, which will rule by domicile that solar eclipse. There's something about the Aries archetype with Neptune and Saturn there very, very soon together, and Saturn ruling Aquarius. That it's telling us all of that Aries archetype stuff gets exported and sent back to the Aquarian sector vis-a-vis rulership, where you have front and center activity. And check out this chart. This is a quad wheel with U.S. Sibley in the middle, Russian Declaration of State Sovereignty, which is the second chart. The third chart is the China chart, which is the Mao chart. It's what he announced, hey, we're now the People's Republic of China, the Mao announcement chart, which I've used for China and I like a lot. And then you have the Ukraine chart, which is their Declaration of Independence. And look at the lineup here. Moon in Aquarius, Moon in Aquarius, Moon in Aquarius, Moon in Aquarius. You actually have the South Node, North Node, Ascendant, and Saturn as well. Look how heavy duty that is with the Aquarian moons. It's all Aquarius moons. What will be happening there in February? A solar eclipse. Mars will be there. Pluto's there. So it's not just that the new triggers of the Aries archetype with Saturn and Neptune is about to happen this February. It's that all of that is ruling an eclipse that triggers the series of moons. Remember, we just looked at that Venezuela chart with the moon in Capricorn, and this is how Venezuela was then brought maybe into the public eye, potentially just using the symbolism of its nativity in the 1811 chart. Well, that same technique would say, hey, wow, we're about to have maybe a major trigger with Russia, China, Ukraine, and the United States. So just keep it in mind. And look, I come back to this, guys. Some of why I do mundane astrology, my theory of it is that it helps me stay engaged with the world. I mean, I'm in the world, I think, and I'm here, and we've got to kind of participate, I guess is what I'm saying, at one level. One way or the other, we have to participate in the world. I find using astrology as another filter for news, it just kind of puts me at a little bit of a distance and kind of protects me a little bit from maybe getting too triggered or too caught up in the illusions or delusions or the mass delusions or the mass illusions. So that's some of why I like to use it. And I think it's particularly relevant with Neptune and Aries coming into Aries, because the symbolism of Neptune and Aries would be delusion or getting lost or getting swept away psychically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually into the kind of fast-moving new breakthroughs of reality, aka wars. And it's one of the things that I talked about in that last video I did, but I do think we have to be careful to not get too caught up in these impassioned triggers that the governments and the media are going to definitely be helping us get caught up in, right? And I'm not saying you can't have politics, you can't choose what you think is right or wrong and participate. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you give yourself a step removed from it, you kind of give yourself a little bit more leeway to choose safely and carefully for yourself how you want to participate. And that's really, I think, almost like a safety valve to check ourselves. We use the mundane astrology to do that. And it may just help us. Hey, if things go really chaotic, guys, we know as astrologers, solar eclipse in Aquarius with all these moons, and Saturn and Neptune will be in Aries, just having entered Aries. And so, okay, let me go to this next chart, and this is the exact chart I was just talking about. Here's the chart of that solar eclipse in Aquarius, and you can see Mars is with the eclipse moon, or the eclipse sun with the moon, and then Pluto is there. And that Pluto is right close to a few of those moons. So it's 19 degrees is where Mars will be, 4 degrees is where Pluto will be. Look at the chart here, going back to it. You've got 5 degrees for Russia, their moon. You've got 3 degrees for China. And then you've got 1 degrees Aquarius, Saturn for Ukraine. So a lot of that is where Pluto is, that lineup. America's got the South Lunar Node, 6 degrees. So that's pretty close to Pluto, that major lineup. And then the 22-degree moon for Ukraine and the 27-degree moon for America, that's later where the eclipse will be and where Mars is closer to. So it's actually triggering, if you want to layer in degrees, pretty closely some of these important placements for these nations in these countries. So back to this chart, just to be very, very clear here, you can see Saturn and Neptune just at 0 degrees, just about to conjoin 3 days after this eclipse. And Saturn is ruling, and therefore the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, because Neptune blends with Saturn, is ruling the eclipse. And that's why it's not just the run-of-the-mill, hey, an eclipse trigger, some new stuff in our reality. It's not simply that. It's then a a massive transit that's a very rare transit that happens every 40 some odd years, or every 300 years if you want to layer in Aries, of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that is also the direct connective symbolic, outcropping of this eclipse. So it's very, very interesting as mundane astrologers to think about what this may do for our world and for our reality. And I want to come back again, your personal life. What is Aquarius in your chart? Where is it? What does that mean for you? How do you have new innovative concepts that you want to actually implement or sort of enforce on yourself or enforce on reality? I think about Aquarius as being that innovative artist that has some interesting ideas that no one else can maybe understand because they're so idiosyncratic. And then I say artist because artists work, they're disciplined, and they're making things. And so artisan, maybe another term, but these are people that are actually like out writing that novel that no one's ever seen a prose style or structure, and they're just working on it for a long time, and then they present it, here's my Aquarian gift, because I stayed consistent with not letting my innovative concepts be influenced or taken away by what the fashion of the day is, right? These are people that are not only innovative, but they're strong enough to protect it and then commit to it over longer periods, the Saturnine idea of longevity. So this is some of the stuff I would highly encourage you to be feeling into your own world. I mean, where do you have committed concepts of ideas of fresh, new, innovative worlds that you want to lock in around? Because this is a sextile, and I'm back now to our interpersonal delineation, but this is quite, I think, optimistic and very, very useful energy. Saturn and Mars are ruling each other. And so these have paired off here to go deep and to activate with power the kind of depth of your new, fresh ideas. And so I'd say, can be very, very wonderful at the layer of our charts and lives, setting aside what may be this major global trigger. And, we'll have to just see, right? Stay tuned, as we say. That's really sometimes the only way to work with astrology is just stay tuned and see what happens. Okay, I want to get the final card here, and while I'm doing that, I'm just going to pull it up here. What's the final card? Here you go. The final one, well, there you go. This is just a beautiful, beautiful conclusion here to this live, because the card is just what I was talking about. It's the single card that, in my view, represents Aquarius the most out of any card, which is the ace. Not the most, because the star card is Aquarius. It's direct correspondence to Aquarius in these correspondence traditions. But the Ace of Swords is the new, right? It's new. The new idea, the new, fresh intellectual ideas that can help us kind of work through reality. We fight in our reality with a sword, with our ideas and the fresh new ideas. So often in tarot, you'll see the aces being new, the idea of new. And so to have the air element, it's the new air element. And now we're back to what I was just saying with Aquarius being these innovations as Mercury rules Aquarius. And so with this 3-card reading, it's kind of perfect that I hope you got some nurturance if we just want to use the notion of beginning, middle, end that I love with a 3-card tarot sentence. Maybe you can think about the holidays and this kind of Jupiter and Cancer moment that we had with the full moon with Jupiter and the nurturance, and maybe you had a good holiday season. I hope a lot of you out there did. Now we're kind of maybe in a little bit of a waning and restful period, but this is telling me when I see that sword in that third position is, hey, we've got this eclipse in Aquarius and a 4-planet pileup in Aquarius at the end of January. We need to be getting out ahead of it, and we just talked about it, so I'm not going to go back and talk about it, but I think the tarot reading very much confirms. Think about your Aquarius sector right now. What do you want to be doing there? Where is it in your chart? What are your new innovative worlds that you're locking into here to get into the first part of this year and to ride out eclipse season? So, okay, everyone, that I believe will conclude this live stream. Maybe I'll just check in. I wasn't going to do a lot of comments because I didn't want to break the stream, but I'm just going to peek in here as we close, and maybe there's a comment or something I can get to. Yeah, February 2026 is so big. I think that's a great point here. Masdala, that's a really big point, so I'm glad to see that. Let me see here, one other one before we go. So when the 5 of Cups turns around and sees those 2 full cups and the sword of truth, the new beginnings. Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I'm going to close with this will be my final comment. But you look, this 5 of Cups is looking down at these cups that have been spilled. And it's almost like And I don't know. Let's go a little bit higher here. What if you are coming into this year and you're looking back at last year, and maybe there was a broken relationship, maybe there were things that didn't turn out how they wanted to turn out for you last year. If we say this Two of Cups would just be maybe our hopes and dreams for 2025 or something, and we're starting this year maybe a little bit, hey, this thing didn't work out last year, and maybe you're still feeling a little sad about it, or still a little bit processing or grieving or emotionally kind of activated. Look, Jupiter's in Cancer for a year. It can take time to heal emotionally. True healing is not controlled. It needs the saturation over a period of months often to really come into a healing moment with healthy boundaries and all of those things. So maybe that's what this is telling us. Hey, maybe we're still in our healing, and then yes, these new ideas are going to be really important. And I think it can be almost saying here, like getting into the Aquarian archetype, which is of the mental state, as a way to kind of come out of what might have been an emotional challenge. Sometimes it's just get into your ideas and you're not thinking about your feelings because your mind is occupied elsewhere. And that could be maybe what this is saying, that this eclipse in February and the Aquarian pileups in February are more about helping us get some fresh mental states so we can sort of reset ourselves or have a more clean slate as we get into the rest of the year. So, okay, thanks for that comment, Angel Hawk. Appreciate you guys. We will then part here, and I'm glad to be with you. I hope to do more of these this year, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace.